to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Brody, and welcome to part one of the life of Erik Kramer. As said in our earlier episode that was posted on Tuesday with Erik, that episode was strictly about the Chicago Bears and his prediction for this upcoming season. This episode is hitting on Erik's experience with depression and suicide and explaining his story about how it's okay to not feel okay and how his road for recovery has helped not only inspire himself, but hundreds of thousands of other people. Many of you may know Erik Kramer unfortunately had some family circumstances that led him to trying to take his own life, but he is very confident now. He is very grateful for his life, and he is doing well. He wants to talk about his experience to tell others that if you are not feeling okay, it is okay to not feel okay. And it's okay to reach out for help. I can speak for it myself. Erik can as well. Check the link in the description for if you know someone or you are experiencing any sort of dark or uncomfortable thoughts, someone is always there to listen to you. So this episode is Erik jumping into fighting depression, anxiety, and his suicide attempt. But overall, great story. Please give it a listen. And also, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to the link below in the description. And we are always here at Just Another Year willing to listen as well. So with that, thank you very much. And here's the, it's great timing as well for this kind of topic. So as some of you may know, September 5th to September 11th is National Suicide Prevention Week. For the year. And Erik has an amazing story in regards to suicide and depression, and that he's overcome it. So Erik, another really exciting reason why to have you on the show today is because of your recovery story. And you shared it with me off script, and it was really inspiring. And some of the viewers may not know about this, but you've overcome a lot this past couple decades in regards to unfortunate family circumstances, a suicide attempt, and a very difficult and unfair annulment. I would love to jump more into today, which also led to your book that's coming out in the next year. Kind of talking about your experience and like how you've overcome it, and if viewers need help or anything, where they can go for it.
Okay, so you brought up a very good thing. So this past Sunday, right, was the kickoff to suicide prevention. Is it week or month? I'm not quite sure.
It's week.
Okay, so what I think is important to note here is that we all face some, just life by definition is going to contain for you, anybody, everybody, some difficult circumstances. And one of the things that I would say that in looking back and is that before any difficult circumstances come your way, which would really kind of be going back to like your youth, right? Is if you can, but if you're past that stage now, still the point is try to look for things in people that you admire in others. Try to make those same qualities in yourself. So things like honesty and being trustworthy, being an active, compassionate listener, right? So when things come your way, or when things go that way for your friends or family or coworkers or whatever, you're now one of those people that could be in someone else's, or they could possibly be in your home team or support group or something, where as life's challenges come your way, you have someone or a few people possibly to kind of let that out to you. And I think that over time, that has its way of curbing the isolation, the anxiety, the depression potentially, that leads to things like what I did, which no doubt there were some crazy things that happened one after another. And so the Cliff Notes version of that, if you'd like me to get into it without taking too much time, is my 18-year-old son, Griffin, prior to being 18, as a sort of adolescent, kind of creeping into his teenage years, started to display, I shouldn't say started, it just kept escalating, behavior issues, the way he talked to others, which is kind of a reflection of potentially the way you talk to yourself. It just started to pick up speed and snowball to where he was isolating him, or he could not figure out why certain friends were not calling him. And so he didn't realize that his role in sabotaging that. And then through other means, we all want to be connected to people in life. And so if you start up here and that's not working, and then you're going to work down here, and then you're going to work down here, and eventually you're going to find your landing spot. And unfortunately for Griffin, it landed in a drug culture. And so by the time he was 14, without getting into all the things that came before that, he was in his sophomore year of high school. And his behavior landed him in a drug rehab center. And he was an inpatient program for about 3 months, was an outpatient program where he lived at home and I would take him in. And but at the same time, along that way, and I can't remember at what point, his mom and I were separated. So that could have played another major role in his eventual demise, right? So he eventually was drug-free for quite a while. But then I could kind of tell around the time he was getting ready to be out of the outpatient program, the mindset that he had eventually adopted was, thank you for having me here, putting me in here, because if not, I would have been either two options, jail or dead, which he was most likely right. And, but towards the end, this would have been like maybe December, January of 2000, like end of 2010, beginning of 2011, that mindset of his started to shift where, oh, that was just them brainwashing me. And look, I just want to be a normal teenager that, parties a little bit, and all great if you could be a normal teenager. But I'm thinking, Griffin, what about your life has been normal to this point? And so eventually, the outpatient program ended, I think in like end of February 2011. And by that time, he was splitting time in living with me half the time and his mom half the time during the week, as was Dylan, his younger brother. And Griffin decided he wanted to live with his mom full time. And she only lived about a mile away, even if that even. And so this he was playing football, which, probably is something he should not have been playing. Probably shouldn't even go into real high school at that point. But he was. And so he played a game. And he was a backup quarterback there at Thousand Oaks High School, played a game on a Friday night. And I picked him up, went to the game, picked him up they played at a junior college and then got bused back to his high school at Thousand Oaks. I picked him up there, brought him back to his mom's house. And, we had a nice conversation in the car, kind of unlike a lot before. It wasn't like we had bad conversations, it was like more like no conversations. Whereas this time he was starting to think about more the future, which was, okay, great. So we sat and talked for a while, even outside where we sat and talked in the car for another 30 minutes probably before he got out. That was a Friday night. And then Sunday morning, I get a phone call from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department asking me to come down. It was probably like 9 or 10 in the morning. And, but yet they wouldn't tell me what it was. And I've never gotten a phone call from anybody that wouldn't tell me what it was, much less the Sheriff's Department. And so, I drove in and walked up the steps. And as I'm walking up, must have been the guy that called me, walks out and told me that Griffin had passed away overnight. And it was what turned out to be a drug overdose. And so that was, very tough. And then probably it happened. So now it's what, 11 years ago. So the perspective of time helps. And But that was the biggest shock to my system, that up until that point, nothing like that had ever happened before. And so that was in itself really tough, really tough. But prior to that, my mom, on Mother's Day of that year, earlier, so 2011, Dylan, my youngest son, and I went out and played golf with my mom and her husband, Doug. So the four of us went out and played golf. And afterward, we had a great time. And afterward, Doug post takes Dylan, maybe back to their townhouse or something. And then my mom and I stayed and had lunch. And as I'm walking her back to the car, it wasn't like we talked about anything earth shattering over, but it was nice. And then, she tells me, oh, I got, tomorrow I'm going to get some results back from a test. And I'm like, what test? And she's like, oh, it's just probably nothing, and well, as it turned out, it was something, and it was stage 4 uterine cancer. And so, I've never talked to anybody before that had cancer, but I figure stage 4 is kind of like that. There's only 4 stages. So somehow they found a oncologist surgeon. And so she survived somehow, some radical surgery. But as it turned out, despite the chemo and everything else she was going through, she eventually passed away in July, following Griffin's passing in the previous October. And then around the time she passed away, my dad had been dealing with some acid reflux. And unfortunately for him, it turned into esophageal cancer. And so the unfortunate part there is there really wasn't anything you could do. And so, and he had some financial struggles. And so he was really, at the time, I'm trying to think of where he was living. He was living with a woman, kind of looking after her young son. And then when he got sick, he had to go into like a nursing facility. But it was way on the other side of town from where I live. And my sister, who still lives in the Las Vegas area, so I was the only one. So I kept getting him little by little closer and closer and closer. So eventually he wasn't very far from me at all. But by that time, it was, he had had a surgery, but that it didn't really, in terms of his outcome, it didn't help any. So he eventually passed away from that as well. And that was, unfortunately, it was not long after I passed away that I came to find out that he passed away. Not I passed away, I shot myself. So after that, I was in a coma for quite a while. During that time, he passed away. So anyway, I guess my point in all that is, yeah, there were some tough times. But for me, what led to me eventually trying to attempt to take my life was this depression. And it didn't hit me right away. It was sad, for sure, saddest I've ever been. But I also discovered at that time that there's this whole other world that you don't know about, that other people too have lost loved ones, sometimes kids. And so they kind of help take you in too. Sometimes there are people sometimes there are people you don't even know that reach out to you. So I've had all those happen too. But eventually, yeah, it became, depression did creep in a way that once it got its grip on me, it wouldn't let go. And so, I wish I could walk you through all the steps, but I don't even know half of them, how it got to be that way. But so eventually, Yeah, I purchased a gun and fortunately was not a good shot, and or someone else was looking out for me is what I think actually happened. And so I'm still here, thankfully, and more grateful than maybe ever. And so I feel like there's a lot left to be done, and so that's kind of the course I'm on now. And I've got a lot of good people around me that have seen me through all this. And, not least of all, my son, Dylan, who, I at the time had no concept of time or place or date or anything. But the night that I shot myself, um, was the day before Dylan's uh, first day of his junior year of high school. So, you know, nobody in their right mind would do that. Nobody. Um, but I did. And so I guess the only way I can look at it now is that obviously if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't. But it takes I don't even know what the mindset is to do that. I'll tell you what it felt like to me is um, what got me there. Part of what got me there, I believe, is that it felt like that the people in my life that had always been around forever and ever were now leaving. Really, nobody was coming. And that eventually led to what I did. And when I say I wouldn't do it over again, meaning that I would have to be again outside of my right mind to do that. And I don't think that's ever going to happen again, because in all of this time, there's not one bubble up sensation or feeling or nothing that has taken me in that direction. It hasn't. And I think some of that is just good fortune. And I think some of it is that I don't know if this is a science. I doubt if it's scientific. I don't know. But hopefully, whatever the part of the brain is that kind of oversees your mood swings or not, I think that's gone now. And that's not what I would prescribe to people, however. I think what I would prescribe to people, and one thing that I'm actively trying to now pursue is, as I said before, I want to get a school program going that will hopefully entail this sort of what I'm about to say, where young kids, maybe 4th, 5th grade, you start a program where you start identifying things in people that as a kid you admire in others. And you begin to strive towards them yourself. You identify them in maybe a peer or 2 or 3, and a parent, possibly, hopefully, teachers, coaches, maybe a family friend, someone to look up to as sort of a mentor, and you start to pull that little group together so that when there are kid problems and 4th and 5th grade problems, you can talk those out. And you're not the one that gets isolated. You start speaking up and you say, look, I'm feeling isolated. And people around you are going to go, no, 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 no. What did you do to make yourself isolated? Nothing. Well, then why are you feeling isolated? So you start to kind of help people determine for themselves, should I be feeling isolated? Should I be anxious? What am I anxious over? Like, I know for me, anxiety, what I would feel at times I wouldn't want to make eye contact with people, because that would invite a conversation that I don't want to have. And I'm not sure I could carry on a conversation. But, and is that really the right perspective? No. So if you can get away a little bit and, have this little group of people to kind of, before that ever happens, you might be able to head a lot of those things off in life. That's what I'm hoping, that currently right now, and I've done some research, there are programs that are geared towards kids that I think would like to be that someday, but aren't there yet. And I think I've got access to some people that have been influential, and I've already experienced them doing this sort of thing. And so I think I'm hopeful that will become a reality, and I'm helping to work to help get that done.
Absolutely. And thank you, Erik, for sharing, obviously that incredible story. And, and it's very unfortunate what's happened. And, I'm very happy that you've overcome it and you're happy and healthy now. And, our, thoughts and prayers are always with you and your family, especially through some of the stuff you've shared with me off air. So, and, I'm excited to see exactly what happens with that program that you want to create for kids. My girlfriend, she's a teacher, and I think that happens a lot, especially, and she's a 5th grade teacher. And when you talk to her about some of the things that she's seen from her studies in graduate school, or in person, you could definitely see things like that at an early developing age, but they don't understand how to express that emotion. I think everyone can kind of say that for themselves as well. So thank you very much for sharing that. It's a very tough subject to say, but I'm excited to hear. I know you've said that you've talked to junior colleges, you've talked to teams, you've talked in, at different, seminars. It's very inspiring, especially, and it takes a lot of person to be able to talk about stuff like that. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. Again, this is part 1 of 2 of Erik Kramer's incredible story of recovery. Please stay tuned and go over to part 2 if you want to hear more. And also, again, please go to the link in the description if there's anything that you ever need, or someone who is struggling with anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts. But thank you very much for joining this episode of Just Another Year Chicago, and we'll see you guys next time.